Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Morganti, the current president of Sisters in Crime Canada West, which is a fabulous collection of writers of crime fiction who have the good fortune to live in or be otherwise connected to Western Canada. Thanks so much for joining our author showcase for the fall of 2021. Our chapter has many talented authors as members. Tonight, we're featuring 6 of them. For anyone viewing the recording of this event, you can find links to their websites at the bottom of each of their slides, and on their websites, you can find convenient buy links for their books. Let me introduce our moderator for this evening, Karen Dodd. Karen is the current vice president of the Canada West chapter and is an accomplished and award-winning author of 2 separate series, the Stone Suspense series and the Niccolo Moretti Crime Thrillers series. Earlier this year, Karen released Everybody Knows, which is the first title in her Niccolo Moretti series. Karen, thank you very, very much for moderating this evening. Karen?
Thank you, Charlotte. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. I'm just telling my husband he needs to get off Zoom while we, all right. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry,
No problem.
husbands are most uncooperatives at times. But I've been looking forward to this showcase, honestly, since we did the one last year. And this, I think this year is going to be even better. We have a wonderful, wonderful lineup of authors this evening. And in order to give everyone the time they need and also have some questions and answers at the end, I'm going to jump right into it. And just to remind our authors, you've all been asked to time yourself, and I know you will. Charlotte is going to give you the 30-second heads up as quietly as she can. And so I'm going to jump right in and introduce the first of our 6 authors this evening, and that is Karen Abramson. So author of the police procedural Detective Kazakov mysteries and the amateur sleuth Phoebe Clay mysteries, Karen L. Abramson writes fantasy, romance, and mystery. Her latest short fiction, I just lost my screen there, Charlotte. What happened? Okay, her latest short fiction can be found in the anthology Moonlight and Misadventure, and in an upcoming issue of Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, as well as Black Cat Mystery Magazine. When she isn't writing, she can be found with a camera and backpack in fabulous locations around the world. Karen's work has been described by national best-selling author M.L. Buckman as having connection to culture and powerful characters that make an incredible story. Tonight, we're going to hear about Karen's latest release, Beneath Malabar Nets, the second Phoebe Clay mystery. Karen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen. Beneath Malabar Nets takes place when Phoebe, her sister, and her niece travel to Kochi, which is a city on the Malabar coast of India. The murder of their guide turns what should have been an idyllic family vacation into a trip of terror. This scene that I'm about to read involves the discovery of the body. The freighter cruised past them, churning its way farther into Kochi's deepwater harbor as the seawall curved around a slight headland. Ahead, huge kite-shaped net structures made of elongated timbers perched on stork pilings along the shore. Some of the kite shapes were bowed low, the nets dipped into the water. Others silhouetted dripping four-sided nets against the streaming early morning light. Below them, along a debris-strewn beach, small fishing boats launched into waves, and above the beach, a line of trees bordered the seawall. The stench of sea wrack filled the air, but there were none of the gulls Phoebe had grown so used to during her Pacific Northwest kayaking forays, Instead, the air around the boats and the fishing nets was filled with black crows. "How about we go closer to the nets?" Phoebe suggested. Alice nodded, and the two of them set off along the shore, Alice hurrying ahead like an eager puppy held up only by the frustratingly slower speed of Phoebe's older legs. "Look, they're going to raise one of the nets," Alice said, and snapped a photo as she rushed ahead and then stopped to wait for Phoebe. "Go on, I'll catch up. Just don't go too far, okay?" Phoebe waved her on. Alice nodded and was off like a shot, scooting along the seawall until she found a set of stairs that took her down through a line of trees onto the sand. Phoebe followed to the stairs and sighed. The only good thing was that Alice was hard to miss as the only blonde amid the darker heads of the locals. She'd be hard to lose sight of. The beach, however, was filthy. Plastic water bottles, old clothing, lost nets, drink containers, styrofoam boxes, etc., clotted around a dead sea turtle. Driftwood caught shoals of half-decomposed fish and broken plastic that crows and mangy dogs dug through. Phoebe picked her way through the mess, trying to keep her sandaled feet clear of the worst of the debris while keeping Alice in her sights. Beyond Alice, the huge old fishing nets rose and dipped. The nets were ancient technology brought by the Chinese when they visited India before Columbus ever found America. The Chinese were more or less gone, except for their modern day investments, but the nets had stayed behind, and from what Phoebe had read, the technology had spread all up and down the Malabar coast. They worked on a cantilevered weight system with huge rocks tied to ropes to offset the weight of the net. Men walking along the narrow wooden net supports provided the additional weight that would raise the net or send it dipping into the water. All but one. One net in the line of 8 or 9 that edged the channel was in the water, but apparently refused to be raised. Perhaps it was a large haul of fish, or, given what was on the shore, more likely garbage that held the net in the water. But the fishermen were laboring, hauling on the rock-weighted lines to slowly raise the net. When Phoebe looked back from the nets to the shore, Alice was nowhere to be seen. Damn and double damn, she'd lost her again. Her heart thumped so hard it was hard to breathe. She'd lost Alice before, almost really lost her, and had almost died trying to get her back. After all they'd been through before, how could she have done this again? Becca would kill her. "Alice," she called, fighting down panic, and rushed down the shore. Things squished underfoot. She broke into a run. "Alice!" How had she disappeared so fast? Ahead, fishermen loosened fish from their turquoise mesh nets and looked up as she ran up to them. "Alice, have you seen my niece?" Their blank stares said that she'd found people who spoke only the local Corellan language. Great. More boats pulled to shore, blocking her path to the line of huge Chinese nets. Alice must have gone around them. Another set of stairs ran up to the seawall. Phoebe stumbled over driftwood piles and ran up the stairs. She turned down the seawall toward the nets. The wind rustled the spreading trees that would provide shade in the sunshine, but now were a nuisance for blocking her view. The nets. Alice had to have gone to the nets. Of course, now there were more people around, out for their morning stroll. She shoved past them, apologizing, her gaze on the nets. Alice had been excited about them being raised and lowered. The one net still remained stationary. A shout came, and through the trees bordering the beach, and, slow as the sun rising over the horizon, the huge net began to swing upward. The trees blocked her view as she rushed toward the net. That was when the screaming started, shrill and frightened, the kind of free-form scream a 13-year-old might scream. She'd heard the same kind of screams in her school as her students lay dying. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Karen. All right. I think Charlotte is just changing our slide. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker and reader tonight, Kathy Ace, who I know many of you are acquainted with. Kathy Ace is Welsh Canadian criminal psychologist sleuth. Kate Morgan encounters traditional closed circle whodunits around the world, while her wise inquiries agency mysteries feature a quartet of soft-boiled female PIs who solve more cozy cases from their office at a Welsh stately home. Her standalone suspense novel, The Wrong Boy, has been optioned for TV, as have her Kate Morgan mysteries. Shortlisted for Canada's Bonnie Blythe Award 3 times in 4 years, winning in 2015. She's also an Ippy and has been shortlisted for a Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence. Kathy lives in Canada, having migrated from Wales, and in her, what, 40s, Kathy? And about Kathy's latest release, which I believe releases officially tomorrow, and that is The Corpse with the Granite Heart. Kathy, please take it away.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you for the lovely introduction. Hello, folks. Nice to see you all. Yes, this book comes out tomorrow, The Corpse with the Granite Heart. It's the 11th Kate Morgan mystery, and I'm going to just jump straight in at the first chapter. Just for your information, each chapter has a title that's a Shakespearean quote, because there is a Shakespearean aficionado's death hanging over this whole book. He died a couple of weeks before it starts, though, so let's not go there. Anyway, Monday, all the world's a stage. The taxi journey from London's Heathrow Airport to the Chelsea Embankment had been a trip down memory lane, seeing places I'd been familiar with when I'd lived in London decades ago. Sadly, my darling husband, Bud, didn't seem quite as enthralled. However, he bucked up a bit when we headed through Earl's Court toward the Thames, understanding we were nearing our final destination, John Silver's home. The main purpose of our trip was to meet John's freshly minted fiancée, one Bella Quiller, to whom he'd recently become engaged, little more than 6 months after he'd endured a blisteringly acrimonious split from his then girlfriend Lottie, with whom we'd spent a difficult time in Jamaica earlier in the year. Will we fit? I asked as the cab drove away. How do you mean? Bud looked puzzled, tired, a bit grumpy and puzzled. To be fair, I'd managed to sleep for at least 8 of the 9.5 hours of our flight from Vancouver, while he'd apparently managed no more than a cat nap. Unusual for a man who swears his years in law enforcement allowed him to develop the ability to sleep on a pin at will. I replied, I'd put money on John's home being no more than 12 feet wide. Where's he going to put us? We could have stayed at a hotel. I know it would have cost a fair bit, but we could have afforded it. We're here as his guests, Kate. Besides, it's a great view, said Bud, turning and giving his attention to the Thames and the imposing sight of Battersea Power Station beyond it. He was right. The waters transformed the slate afternoon skies into an impressionist rendering of colour and texture. A bus swooshed past, and I scampered away from the threat of filthy flying spray. Come on, it looks like it's about to start snowing again. I began to drag my uncooperative suitcase toward the 2 steps leading up to the doorway. Stay there, I'll do it, said Bud, grappling with both our bags. I texted John from the cab. He knows we're due. As my husband raised his hand to the knocker, the door flew open, and there stood John Silver, Bud's sometime colleague in all manner of international intelligence gathering activities, and our saviour on a couple of occasions. He looked a great deal better than the last time I'd laid eyes on him. Then he'd been haggard, looking older than his 60-ish years, and coming to terms with a significant discovery about his own fallibility, so not his best. Now he looked happy and in great shape. His long, lean body looked slightly fuller than usual around his midsection, and his smile, it could have illuminated the whole of Trafalgar Square. Bud, Kate, how wonderful, come on in. John immediately enveloped me in his long arms, squashing my face into his chest. Tall people never seem to realize they could easily suffocate a short person when they hug them. John eventually released me, then stepped back and told us how well he thought we were looking, considering we'd been on the road for pretty much 24 hours. Bud commented upon the size of John's smile. John patted his tummy, rolled his eyes in naughty schoolboy fashion, and replied, that's not all that's bigger these days. Bella's a dab hand in the kitchen. And we'll get to meet the lucky woman this evening, right? Asked Bud. Yes, you will. John was faffing. Never a good sign. Anything we should know? I couldn't help but ask. John let go of the handle he was fiddling with and looked at his feet. Another tell of his. We're having dinner at her place. You'll meet her then, and her sister and brother, and a few other close friends of the family too. I could tell by the redness creeping up John's neck there was something he wasn't sharing. For a Secret Service liaison, he's worryingly transparent on occasion. And, I prompted. Bud flashed a frown at me, but John finally made eye contact. he swallowed. It's not one of her spag ball specials. Rather, it's a dinner to mark what would have been Bella's late father's 80th birthday. He died a few weeks back. Sorry to hear it, said Bud. How did he? It's not often Bud's lost for words, so I decided he must have been as tired as he claimed. John came to his old comrade's rescue. Don't panic. No cause for alarm at all. I know what life's like for you two, having to unmask killers wherever you go. This was one of those blessed release situations. Poor chap had been ill for some time. Cancer. Pretty much riddled with it by the end. Only managed 3 days in palliative care. Bella's doing not well, to be truthful. Maybe, considering the circumstances, that's understandable, but be assured those circumstances are absolutely not suspicious. While death
30
appears to follow
seconds.
you wherever you go, on this occasion, it beat your arrival quite handily, but with no reason for you two to become involved. You may stand down, sir, madam. He mugged a grin and saluted both Bud and me.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Fabulous. All right. I put a message in the chat that we're having a rainstorm up here in Lions Bay. So that might be part of my internet. All right, our next reader this evening is Marcel Dubay, again known to many of you. Marcel is the author of the Mendenhall Mystery Series and the winner of the Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence for Cold Wave in Crime Wave, a Canada West anthology. She grew up near Montreal after trying out a number of different provinces and living in the Yukon for over 35 years. She now lives in Alberta, which is much like the Yukon in all the ways that count. Her sixth Mendenhall mystery is coming out soon. Marcel's most recent novel, which we're going to hear about tonight, is Identity Withheld. Marcel, take it away. You're still muted, Marcel. Marcel, you're still muted.
There.
Yes, we've got you now.
All right.
Start all over again. We want to hear from the beginning.
So, well, what I was saying was thanks, Karen, for the nice introduction. Okay, so Cleo Brennan, the main character in this story, rushes to Fredericton, where her parents have been in a terrible accident. As she schleps back and forth between the hospital and her parents' house, she begins to realize that the accident wasn't one and that there's now someone after her. So here we go. Every instinct screamed at Cleo to run, but still she hesitated. How likely was it that someone was in the house? She had checked both outside doors before going to bed and made sure the chairs were secure under both doorknobs. Nobody could have come in. But what if they were already in the house when she arrived? Suddenly she was shaking. She had to check or she'd never fall back to sleep. With a sigh, she turned away from the door to get her sweatshirt from the foot of the bed. She was about to pull it over her head when the third step from the bottom creaked, the way it creaked every time she came upstairs. In 2 long steps, she was at the door and closing it as softly as she could. It had no lock, but the chair by the dresser would block entry, at least for a while. As soon as she snugged it under the doorknob, she ran to the window and opened it, wincing when it squealed. Grabbing her sweatshirt and jeans, she tossed them out onto the front porch roof and was about to climb out when she remembered her phone. She grabbed it from the nightstand and swung her right leg over the wet windowsill before looking out to make sure the maple tree was still where she thought it was. It was there, all right, but not as close as she'd remembered. And the closest branch was at least 5 feet from the edge of the porch roof. Could she even reach it? The maple's gold and red leaves shimmered light and dark in the streetlight. They fluttered not so much from a breeze, but from raindrops plopping on them. Her exposed leg was getting wet, and she was now shivering uncontrollably. The doorknob behind her rattled softly as somebody turned it, and she swung her butt onto the window ledge and pulled her left leg out until both feet rested against the slick cement tiles. The phone in her hand was a problem. She would need it when she was on the ground, but right now she needed both hands. She reached down and picked up the sweatshirt, then wrapped the phone in it, tying both sleeves to make a padded bundle. Then she tossed the sweatshirt and jeans over the edge of the porch roof. Hopefully the grass would cushion the phone's landing. She twisted herself outside out of the window and, clinging to the windowsill, gingerly felt her way down the roof's slick tiles. She only made it 3 feet before she had to let go of the sill. Her toes curled, trying to grip the wet cement tiles. Crouching, she slid 1 foot past the other, trying to move forward without falling. At last, she reached the edge of the porch roof, where she remained crouched like an awkward gargoyle, her arms out, her t-shirt plastering itself against her shivering body. The chair under the doorknob in the bedroom squealed suddenly as somebody tried to push the door open, and she glanced down at the ground 15 feet below her. If she missed the tree, she could really hurt herself. Then the bedroom door burst open in a shriek of splintering chair, and she launched herself off the edge of the roof. For a split second, she thought she would crash to the ground, a broken mess. Then her windmilling arms connected with the tree branch, and she flung her arms around it, her feet scrambling for purchase on the lower branch. She hung there, half supported by a flimsy branch barely within reach of her feet, her hands barely able to hang on to the upper branch. A movement out of the corner of her eye caught her attention, and she glanced over to see a man sticking his head out of the bedroom window. Even in the faint light, she could see that he had dark eyes and dark hair and a hard, angular face. His gaze caught hers, and his eyes widened in horror as he grasped her situation. Then the branch beneath her feet broke, and she plummeted to the ground, the flesh on her legs and ribs tearing under the assault of twigs and tree branches. She heard someone scream and had time to realize it was her before she landed. Her feet hit first, then the rest of her followed. She slammed her chin to her knee, her head snapped back, and everything went dark. Thank you. Can't hear you, Karen.
Thank you. I'm trying to be quiet at the wrong time. Thank you, Marcel. That was fabulous. All right, our next speaker is Joanna Van Der Vloot, and Joanna is an indie author and illustrator. She hosts a podcast called JCV Art Studio from the Dressing Room, which provides authors and artists an opportunity to tell their story, a dress rehearsal before taking their book launch or art show on the road. Great idea. Joanna's debut novel, The Unraveling, was a 2019 Canadian Book Club Awards finalist. Previous publications include essays and short fiction in various anthologies. As for Joanna's illustrations, which have been purchased worldwide, her motorcycle series called Woman Empowered has been shown in art shows in Victoria, and all her art can be viewed on her website or Instagram. Her latest release is the legal thriller Dealer's Child. It is a 2021 Canadian Book Club Award finalist. And so please welcome Joanna. Go ahead.
So everyone can hear me okay? Yeah,
We can.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. And we see your title behind you.
okay. So I'm going to read from chapter 22, which is called Dirty Cop. My heroines, they're two sisters. Jade is a lawyer. Sometimes she does ad hoc prosecution. Sometimes she's a defense lawyer. And her sister has her own all-female motorcycle gang. So here we go, chapter 22. And the sisters have just been ambushed, okay? Stop him. Osmond tightened his grip. Shut up. I gasped. Oz, I said, shut it. He again banged my body against the wall. My head throbbed. I stared at him, not understanding, wanting him to stop Dennis. I heard a crash from the other room. Where's the money, the audio files, the paintings? Give it to me, and deranged Dennis leaves Sage alone. I don't have. Osmond's eyes narrowed, and he again banged me against the wall. Not the right answer, Jade. No, Sage yelled from the other room. Tell me what you know, and I'll stop Dennis from assaulting your sister. I squirmed. We only have cash. Cash, the back of the pictures. That's it, I pleaded. I'll give it to you. Let Sage go. That's not all Oscar left you. Sage screamed. Stop him. I kicked against the wall and tried to swing at Osmond. He stepped back, letting me go, then backhanded me. My body twisted. I hit the kitchen cupboard and slid to the floor. I pushed myself to my hands and knees. I heard another scream. Osmond grabbed me around the waist and rammed me against the wall, my face pressed against it, my ears ringing. Tell me. He turned me around, his hand gripping my throat. Where is it? I gulped. You're choking. He flung me toward the kitchen table. I grabbed onto the edge, but still fell to the floor. Do you really think I came back into your life because I liked you? I crawled, following the blood splatters on the tile, sensing him behind me. I'll give it to you. Blood dripped from my nose. All of it. Sage's house. Let Sage go. Osmond stepped in front of me and kneeled. I scrambled backwards. It's called a honey trap for a reason, Jade. Find a pathetic woman, starved for a little attention. He pushed aside the upturned table. Show her some affection, and she'll tell you anything. You can have all of it. His cell vibrated. Women aren't the only ones who can weaponize sex. Rogue cop, fighting the bad guys, sleeping with a successful lawyer, like a romance novel. He grabbed my coat collar. I had you eating out of my hand. I scooped handfuls of ash. Eat this. I mashed my hands into his eyes. He screamed, covering his face with his hands, and stumbled toward the sink. I ran down the hall. Sage. I stopped at a doorway where I saw Sage face down on a charred pool table, hands tied behind her back, her leggings around her ankles. Dennis stood behind her, undoing his belt. I'll show you my No. Armchair, fireplace, fire poker. I lunged, grabbed, and swung. I heard the snap as the fire poker struck Dennis behind the right knee. He screamed and dropped. I swung again, this time hitting him in the shoulder. He screamed again, wide-eyed. I stepped back, lost my balance, and crashed against the pool table, pulling Sage over onto the floor with me. Sage. She lay, eyes open but unfocused. I stumbled to my feet and moved toward Dennis, lying on the floor. I raised the fire poker above my head. Stop. Osmond again had his gun pointed at me, his eyes bloodshot, streaks of wet ash on his face. I clutched the fire poker. Put it down. This fire poker was my only defense. Dennis, get up. Osmond kicked his foot. Drop it, Jade. I stepped forward, vibrating, clutching the fire poker like a baseball bat. No. My voice came out raw like an injured animal. You hurt me. I swung the poker. Osmond and Dennis stepped back. You hurt my sister. I swung again. You come near us and I'll take your goddamn head off. Osmond's eyes widened. His hand wavered. Dennis, we gotta go. Bikers. Dennis struggled to his feet. Blood soaked through his pant leg. He staggered and glared at me. Osmond lowered his gun. If I don't find what I'm looking for, I'm coming for you, and he'll kill her dog. He
10
stepped
seconds.
backward, then turned and took off after Dennis. I wanted to kill him. Jade, Sage. I dropped the fire poker and pulled Sage upright. Hey, I cradled her head in my hands. You with me? Come on, girl. She moaned, her head hanging forward. She pulled her leggings up and leaned against the pool table. She had a cut on the side of her head, a bleeding nose, and a split lip. Sage, I did up the buttons on her shirt. Hey, talk to me. Come on, girl. I'm here.
Time, Joanna.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, no problem.
I was just completely entranced there. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you, Charlotte. All right, that was fabulous. So our second to last reader this evening, then we're going to get to ask questions. We're going to find out where we can find out about our readers and their work, their books, their website. Charlotte's going to help us with all of that. So our next speaker is P.D. Workman. Pamela is an award-winning and USA Today best-selling author. She writes riveting mystery suspense and young adult books dealing with mental illness, addiction, abuse, and other real-life issues. Pamela started publishing in 2013. She has won several literary awards from Library Services for Youth in Custody for her young adult fiction. She currently has over 70 published titles. Yes, that is correct, 70. Tonight, we're going to hear about Unlawful Harvest, the first title in Pamela's Kenzie Kirsch medical thrillers. Pamela, take it away.
All right, I'll even unmute myself first. There we go. All right, thank you. Yes, so this is the first in the Kenzie Kirsch series, which is a spin-off from my Zachary Goldman Private Investigator series. And this book is sort of Kenzie's origin story. So this is how she ended up getting into death investigations. Mackenzie heard voices and footsteps approaching in the hallway. I think maybe the doctor's here. I'll call you back later, okay? Sounds good. Leave me a message if you can't get through. I always pick them up. She murmured another goodbye and hung up. A doctor in a white coat entered, followed by several other doctors, all looking too young to be the real thing and very intense. The head of the pack gave Mackenzie a reassuring smile of greeting. How's our patient? He asked, in a hearty voice that Mackenzie was afraid would waken Amanda. But then he was probably going to wake her up to examine her anyway. She wanted to know that they were paying attention to Amanda's condition and understood what was going on with her. She's mostly been sleeping, but she's still very hot and restless. The doctor picked up the chart at the foot of the bed and looked at it. Hasn't been throwing up since they started antiemetics. Good fluid output. No signs of dehydration, he summarized quickly. He turned to his students. Here we have a patient with a grafted kidney who's been admitted for observation. Fever and chills, achy, throwing up, general malaise. What are your observations and orders? Several of the students offered their opinions. The doctor nodded and shot back questions and made suggestions. He looked down at the clipboard at the suggestion of one of the young doctors that she might be rejecting her transplant. What is the average length of time that a kidney transplant will last? He asked, with a proper anti-rejection regimen in place, of course. Several numbers were thrown around. Mackenzie was relieved to hear numbers longer than 10 years. It had only been 8 since Amanda's transplant, so she should still have a few good years left. In this case, it's only been a year since the graft, so we're very early on in the process. And if the tissues were a good match and the anti-rejection protocol is working, then we should still have 8 years, Mackenzie interrupted, amused. It's been 8, not 1. He looked down at the clipboard. 8? No, I don't think so. It only says 1 year here. Then someone wrote it down wrong. I should know, I was her donor. You? He looked down again. According to the notes here, it was a non-related living donor. I just assumed. He looked at from Mackenzie to Amanda, studying the similarities in their features. They were pretty obviously sisters. Anyone who saw them together recognized the fact. I'm her sister, Mackenzie agreed. They must have mixed up her history with someone else's. He tapped the board with his thumb as he looked down at it. I will follow up with the staff and we'll get it straightened out. At any rate, if she is rejecting her graft, whether after 1 year or 8, What would be the signs and symptoms? He asked his little brood of doctors. There was an ensuing discussion. He eventually put the clipboard back, nodded to Mackenzie, and headed out again. He didn't examine Amanda, even just to check her pulse or her temperature. Then he was off and running again. As they left, Mackenzie saw that Lisa was standing outside the door waiting for them to leave. Once they were out of the way, moving down the hall to the next room, Lisa entered. She handed Mackenzie a cup of coffee and sighed. "Did you hear that?" Mackenzie demanded, not sure how long Lisa had been waiting there. "They've got her history all screwed up. We need to talk to the nurses and get them to enter the right details. They can't make a good diagnosis and treatment plan when they don't even know her history." "He probably just misread it," Lisa said with a shrug. "That was when she had her surgery." Mackenzie was nonplussed at first, then remembered the trip to a private clinic that was pioneering some new technique. Amanda had not been doing well prior to the clinic, and Mackenzie was pleased when Amanda had come back with much improved kidney function. She'd not been sure about experimental treatments, thinking they should stick to what was tried and proven, but she had to admit that they had made the right choice. Amanda had been on a dangerously steep downward slope, but the experimental surgery, whatever it was, had managed to stall the deterioration and improve her kidney function again. What exactly was it she had done? Mackenzie asked, trying to remember the details. They really did turn things around, didn't they? It was a lifesaver, Lisa agreed. I don't know if she would have lasted more than a few months without it. Amanda had been back on dialysis at that point, and they'd been talking about the need for another transplant. Whatever groundbreaking research that private clinic had been doing had been well worth whatever price her parents had paid.
Thank you. Fabulous. I love the variety with all the readings and all the stories. We'll get to talk a little bit more about that. All right, now, and you probably noticed in the chat that Charlotte's been putting everyone's website up. So make sure you grab those, and we'll make sure they come up again as well. So our last speaker for this evening, and then we get to talk to all our authors and find out more about their books, is Susan J. Wright. Susan studied anthropology and architecture before finally settling on law. She worked as a litigator at a national law firm before joining the in-house legal group of an international corporation. Her legal career took her around the world, from the boardrooms of Calgary to the streets of Beijing. She's a member of Crime Writers of Canada and Sisters in Crime. When she's not writing, she's traveling with her husband and 2 daughters. Her favorite vacation was a trip from Prague to London on the Orient Express. My dream. Susan writes legal thrillers. Her short story, Madeline in the Moonlight, was recently published in the anthology Moonlight and Misadventures. So please, Susan, take it away.
Thank you very much. So I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
So the book, Box of Secrets, actually is about a young lawyer, Evie Valentine, who is a very smart, very sharp young lawyer who spent the first 4 years of her legal career working at a large law firm. And then after a horrific incident, left to start up her own law firm with her partner, Keith Lawson. And she's actually in her element when we meet her at first, because she's been asked to help the re-election campaign for the charismatic mayor of the city. She likes law, she likes politics, and now she's going to get to do both of them. What she needs to do, though, is just to chat with her partner first, just to make sure things are all copacetic before she makes the final commitment. And so we're going to pick it up from where she is meeting with her partner, Keith, first thing in the morning to have a conversation about this. Keith and I have complementary work habits. I get in around 8 o'clock and stay late. He arrives at the crack of dawn and leaves by 5 o'clock so he can get home in time for dinner with his wife and young daughter and still squeeze in a couple of hours for splitting rails or building retaining walls or whatever it is he does out there on his country acreage. I found him at his desk poring over the newspaper. "Did you see this?" he said, pointing at the story above the fold on the second section. "City police investigating suspicious death." Keith has a soothing voice. If he weren't a lawyer, he could be a radio announcer. I plopped down in his visitor's chair and placed 2 fresh lattes on his desk, pushing one closer to him. He gave an appreciative nod and continued reading. About 1:30 p.m., officers responded to a report of a disturbance at 400 3rd Avenue Southwest. Upon arrival, they found a woman on the pavement. Emergency responders pronounced the woman dead at the scene. I caught my breath. Yep, on the sidewalk right outside Gates, Case and White. Apparently, the dead woman was Juliana Westerberg, a lawyer at Gates. She fell from the 45th floor. He glanced up. Did you know her? I don't remember her. I shook my head. I didn't remember her either. Not that that meant anything. Junior associates were little more than cannon fodder at Gates, worked to exhaustion and then tossed out if they complained. He continued reading. The homicide detective division has taken over the investigation and an autopsy is scheduled for later this week. Investigators are asking anyone who may have spoken with Westerberg in the days leading up to her death or anyone with information about the case to contact the police. 2 photos accompanied the story. One showed a couple of burly police officers cordoning off the sidewalk with yellow caution tape. The other was a close-up of Juliana and her partner Paul laughing into the camera. They were an attractive couple. I wonder how Dennison's handling this, Keith said. Phil Dennison is Gates's managing partner and top biller. In a law firm, like most large corporations, money and power go hand in hand. Dennison's leadership style, if one could call it that, left a lot to be desired. He was a former football player who thinks a law firm is like a football team, just with more players on the field. I snorted. Based on personal experience, Dennison's #1 priority will be to keep the firm's name out of the papers. Juliana's family and coworkers, not his problem. There was an awkward silence as we flashed back to the events that triggered my decision to leave the firm. Keith coughed and then changed the topic. So what's on your mind? You're not running off to the island, are you? I love Vancouver Island, but had no intention of ditching Keith and our partnership. I told them I'd bumped into Mikhail, Nicholas, and Elizabeth at the bakehouse, and they'd asked me to volunteer in Mikhail's re-election campaign. I could give them 1/3 of my time. Things slow down around here in the summer, so it shouldn't be a strain on the firm's resources. Given that there were only 3 of us, this may have been an overstatement. Nevertheless, I pressed on. It's not as crazy as it sounds at first blush. Now I sounded like Rumpel of the Bailey. It's doable. Besides, I'm only a phone call away and the campaign office is just a few blocks south if AJ needs me. Alexander James Braxton, or AJ, as he's known to everyone except his mother, is 32 and whip smart. He joined us 3 years ago. Keith still calls him young AJ, which is kind of funny given that AJ is only 2 years younger than I am. I can be here in a heartbeat if things go pear-shaped. Keith nodded thoughtfully. It's not the time commitment I was wondering about. It's whether our firm wants to be identified with a particular mayoral candidate. Well, look at it this way, I said. Every major law firm in town is going to donate to 1 or more candidates. Lawson Valentine has always been innovative, on the forefront of change. We're just donating my time, not our money. I wiggled an eyebrow at him. He laughed. Lawson Valentine may be a creative law firm and forward-looking, but Keith is a very cautious, thoughtful lawyer who takes his time making decisions. Given my tendency to dive into situations headlong, this is probably a good thing. I stood up and smiled at him, resisting the urge to give him a hug. I grew up in a Hungarian household. We were very touchy-feely that way, but spontaneous bursts of affection were no longer appropriate in the workplace. Right, well, I gotta get back to work. We've got a busy 2 months ahead of us. Neither of us realized it at the time, but the events of the next 2 months were going to push us and our firm to its limits. So that's that. I got the feeling I was faster than the rest of you guys.
You didn't get the warning, that's for sure.
I beat you. That's right. I got ahead of the 30 seconds.
Oh, great job. Thank you so much, Susan. Everyone did an amazing job. I know I've only been on a showcase once and I was so nervous, and it's always so different reading your own work than it is writing it, and our readers look at it differently as well. And so I just I really commend all of you. Thank you for your readings. Thank you for staying on time, because that is going to allow me to ask a really important question of each of you. And then I believe Charlotte's going to open it up so that our guests can speak with you and possibly ask you some questions as well. So I'm going to go back alphabetically. I had thought about reversing the order, but that's hardly fair because Susan just finished. So it'll give her a chance to catch her breath.
Thank you.
I'm going to start. Thank you, Karen. our Susan. I'm going to start with Karen Abramson. And, I think whenever, because your books, your stories are so varied, all within the crime genre, but lots of subgenres. I think certainly as a reader, I always am interested in where did the impetus, where did the idea come from? For some people, it's ripped right out of the headlines and they fictionalize it from there. Others are very, more personal stories. So Karen, can I start with you and ask you what the impetus, the idea was for Beneath Malabar Nets? Or if you want to talk about the series, whatever is better for you.
Well, I will tell you about Beneath Malabar Nets. I actually, not too long ago, had an opportunity to travel in southern India with a friend and with a tour guide. And by the time we hit Kochi, I would have been happy if he'd ended up in the bottom of one of the nets. So that's what led to this particular story. Is I came home and it took me months to process just how upsetting this person was. And so I figured the best way to deal with it was to do what a writer can do and kill him in effigy. So that's what I did. But
have you ever told him this?
I've never talked to that tour guide again. Yeah. It was just, it was a difficult tour. Let's just put it that way. I'm not a tour person. I am a backpacker, as you said in the opening. And so this was a difficult situation. But anyway, I mean, the whole series really arises out of my love for travel and doing some adventurous things. And so the first story came out of that. Through Dark Water was the one that takes place in the Northwest, or kayaking off in Johnston Strait. And this one then in India, and the next one's in Cambodia, and the one after that will be in BC again. So bringing you back.
And Karen, am I correct that with you, because photography is also a great skill and a passion of yours, is it your photographs on the cover, certainly for Malabar Nets, but I think for all of them, yeah?
Yeah, it is on this particular one. It wasn't in the first one, but
okay. Yeah. It's beautiful cover. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to do a reading. It was wonderful.
Pleasure. We're really glad you could be here. All right, I'm going to go to Kathy Ace next. And Kathy, again, just such a variety in stories. Tell us what, particularly The Corpse with the Granite Heart, which I love the title, and if you like your series, where did this book come from? Where did this story come from?
Well, I don't know whether you've spotted it, but since I'm a short, overweight, bossy Welsh Canadian university professor, and Kate Morgan is a short, overweight, bossy Welsh Canadian university professor, we've actually got quite a lot in common. In that I tell the stories in the first person, you can be pretty sure she sounds rather like me. So there's that. And each of the books, again, like Karen's, is set in a different country, different city in a different country. And the first book was set in the south of France, where I used to live. And each of the books is set somewhere I've lived or worked. So Budapest, and this one coming out tomorrow is set in London, where I did live for 17 years. I wanted to take Kate back to London because, of course, she also lived there. And I wanted her to have to lay some ghosts to rest because I knew that would give me a chance to lay some ghosts to rest. So I've taken her back to London pre-Christmas. All the books are contemporary and they are written whenever you're reading them. Okay, that's when they're set, whenever you're reading them. It's not a COVID world. That doesn't exist in Kate's world at all, because I've learned some readers might discover my work in 8 or 9 years' time, and goodness knows what will be happening in the world by then. So it's a whenever you're reading it now, And I've given Kate the chance to go to certainly some art galleries that I love and know very well. I've also sent her to a restaurant that was a favorite of mine that sadly no longer exists, but it does now in this book. And that's the wonderful thing about writing. You can recreate those gorgeous palaces and all of the things that Shakespeare talks about dissolving into nothing and leaving not a rack behind. You can summon them and bring them alive and fresh to the page and to the reader. And I find that such a wonderful joy to be able to do. So I've taken her to London, gives her a chance to lay some ghosts to rest, but it also brings her into contact with someone and a situation which drags up rather more of her past than she'd been imagining she'd encounter. So, you know, it's quite an interesting one for Kate. It's very Shakespearean. I've used the 5-act tragedy shape, and there's a higher body count in this one than in any of the Kate Morgan mysteries so far. Yes, really going for it. But no gore on the page. I mean, very traditional in that respect, so you can read it safely. So there you go. That's why she went to London.
Thank you, Kathy. Isn't it wonderful? We get paid to make up all these stories and indulge ourselves in locations. And, you know, I know for many of you, your setting is like a character in itself, and especially with a series. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us. Marcel, over to you. I've got Identity Withheld, and I haven't read it yet, but I read the one with I know I'm going to mangle the title, but the boy in the shoes,
The Shoeless Kid.
Thank you, that I enjoyed the Shoeless Kid. Tell us what generated the idea for Identity Withheld for you.
It was a conversation with my eldest daughter, who was astonished to learn something about my past. And I kept thinking about that conversation for the next few days, how odd it was that she was so surprised that I could have had a past, you know? And then it occurred to me that perhaps I don't know as much about my own parents as I thought I did. And then from there, I thought, well, what if you always knew that your parents were hiding something? What if you always knew that they had a secret that they weren't telling you? And that's where the story built from.
Wow. And of course, you know that everybody now is going to read this because they want to know something about your past, Marcel.
Oh, really, it's quite boring.
They say there's always something of us, of the writer in the book.
Really?
And I was actually just gonna, yeah, that's what apparently I was gonna draw your attention to the chat as well, because there were so many great comments after each of your readings, and people saying they wanted to read your book or they have it, or so I encourage you to have a look at that when you're not busy talking to me. So thanks, Marcel. All right, so let's go next to, I'm just scrolling down here on my, oh my goodness, what happened to my document? Is it Joanna? No, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, it is Joanna.
Yeah.
Next. How do we get to the V so fast? All right. So again, what was the your story is really gritty. There's a lot of background there that I could, you know, just relate to certain parts in Vancouver. But tell us what was the idea for this story. What started it?
Well, it's a little bit similar to Marcel's, and that with my heroine, Jade, I remember walking and thinking, again, that what if, right? An author's favorite 2 words. What if your heroine grew up and had this lovely household, and then because of certain events, she realizes that her whole upbringing was a lie, and everything that she thought was her, like her family, was a lie. Okay, so that's where it started with. And I have a little bit of paranormal elements in the story, which the scene I read doesn't show the paranormal elements, just a little bit. But the other thing I loved was bringing in 1968, bringing in Jade's quest for the truth, bringing in her mother and the amazing thing with her mother is that this character just came on these pages and she was a blast to write about. Okay, because we all have been, if you have children, they don't think of you as maybe having, like Marcel said, a past, right? That you once used to be 16, 17, maybe not have the best judgment, right? So that's where the story idea came from. And what was really cool was bringing in the motorcycle illustrations in the sense of empowering these women. Like that's their freedom is getting on their bikes. So yeah.
And for you, Joanna, this is a debut, correct? Will this be a series?
Actually, this is the second one.
Oh, sorry, my apology.
That's all right. Hey, you got a lot going on, remembering. I went over the time and I was practicing reading today. So, it's second in the series.
It'll carry on.
And I've just started working on book 3. So it'll be a series. And I'm trying to take in and learn from all the other authors. I've heard about a series having an arc. So I'm that's what I'm trying to learn. Yeah.
Well, we'll just have to have another meeting with wine and I'll talk about that. Thank you. All right, Pamela, tell us what the impetus was. Oh, good, you're unmuted. Tell us the impetus for for Unlawful Harvest. And this is the first title in this one. I think that's why I was confusing that. Yeah. What made you want to tell this story?
Well, this was an interesting one. As I said, it's a spin-off from my Zachary Goldman mystery series, which is a private investigator series. In that series, then Kenzie Kirsch is Zachary Goldman's girlfriend or partner. She works out at the medical examiner's office, partly as an administrator and partly doing medical work, hoping to become a medical examiner one day herself. And so she helps him out with different files or when he has medical questions or things like that in the mysteries that he's solving. And I was working, I got into a collaborative project, which was a medical thriller anthology with 16 other authors. And so I needed to write a new medical thriller for this anthology. And I wanted it to be something that there was a natural next read. I wouldn't have a chance to write several in the series before it was published, but I wanted there to be a natural next read. And so I hit on the idea of making it Kenzie's origin story, and then readers could jump from there into the Zachary Goldman series where the two of them meet. And then later on, when I'd written more in the Kenzie Kirsch series, they could also go on with the Kenzie Kirsch series. And so I started to collect some of the clues that had been dropped in the Zachary Goldman series about Kenzie's past, her apparent estrangement from her family, her red sports car, her attraction to Zachary, but her reluctance to jump straight into a serious relationship. Why doesn't she talk about her parents? Where does a medical student get the money to buy such a fancy car? What drew her into medical investigation? And so once I started to map out all of these different details, then I hit on the idea of gray market organ transplants. And so I did a bunch of research into transplant tourism and black market transplants and all of that kind of thing, which was a really interesting rabbit hole to go down. So that's how I got into Unlawful Harvest. And just as a side note, I'm running a promotion right now, so you can get Unlawful Harvest for free right now. And the second book in the Kenzie Kirsch series you can get for 99 cents. So if you pop by my
fabulous.
website, you can see the details on those. And then the third and fourth Kenzie Kirsch books released this month and next month and are available on pre-order.
Wow, fabulous. You got a lot going on. A lot of you have a lot going on before Christmas.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. All right, Susan. And Susan, I owe you an apology because I did not get to the last part of your bio. And so just before you tell us the idea for Box of Secrets, which was the book that you read from this evening, I just wanted to say that with this book being Susan's debut novel and the first in the Evie Valentine mystery series, she was also a finalist in the 2021 Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence for Best Unpublished Manuscript. So I do apologize for leaving that out. And so please tell us, that was such a great reading. Tell us what prompted the story for you.
Well, thank you. Actually, when Kathy was talking about her character, who seems very much like her, I was getting flashbacks to me too, except the big difference between Evie and me is that I'm old enough to be Evie's mother. So Evie is loves law. She's working at the big law firm, and then she moves from there and works on a political campaign. And the thing that I find interesting about life in general is what goes on behind the curtain. So yeah, I think all writers have this natural curiosity, but little things like one of my most memorable vacations when the children were young was when we went to the Okanagan and we got a chance to go through the Sunkist factory and figure out how they got the juice into the juice boxes. Those are the kinds of things that I always find fascinating. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to actually talk about what a political campaign would be like from the inside, having done that myself. And so there's a bit in the story here where Evie Valentine actually, as she's running, helping the volunteers who are the door knockers, and they're the ones who go knock on your door and you snarl at them when they show up. Well, when you're on the other side of that door, when you're the door knocker, it's incredible the experiences you have. So Evie puts together a brownie points chart where she gives 20 points for the volunteer who can actually convince the guy on the other side of the threshold to vote for her guy. She'll give 15 points for the creepy guy from Deliverance or the zombie lady from World War Z. She'll give 10 points for the naked man. And I can tell you from personal experience, single men living alone, lounging about in their homes, think that clothing is optional. And there is nothing more disconcerting than knocking on the door for somebody and they open it and the guy is wearing his shorts, if you're lucky, and trying to have a political conversation as you're ducking around the side, shoving materials out. So there's an element of humor to the story just because you get a chance to see the inside of a campaign and the things that are going on. So it's serious, but there's also a bit of goofiness going on back there. But like I said, for me, the big thing for Evie was we've got a character who loves the law and believes in the rule of law. And she comes right up against people who are so powerful and so rich that they think the law doesn't apply. And for me, what was a challenge was thinking about how far would someone go when they're faced with somebody who says the rules don't bind me and there's nothing you can do about it. When she's come across a secret, it's a dangerous secret. She needs to find a way to get this out. Lawyers keep dying along the way, and she's trying to find a way to protect herself and the people she cares about. And how far can she go? So that was the thing for me that I was trying to explore as I was going through it, is where is that line for someone who starts in a really good place? How do they move that line? What do they do about it? And thank you, before I forget, thank you very much for inviting me because this is such a fantastic book.
Oh, we're so glad you could make it, all of you. Yeah, I was going to comment earlier on, I think it's been a difficult decision for all of us, whether we would include COVID in a contemporary story. I chose not to, and I think it sounds like the rest of you have as well. But I was just thinking also, we won't get into politics tonight, but you know, a lot of what you're talking about right now has, we've been seeing that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
the rules don't apply to certain people and the wealthy and all of that. So
Yeah,
I love all those connections. All right. Well, you know, this is not a formal evening, but I wanted to, just before we open it up for questions, and if we don't have any, I'm sure I can come up with more. But if anybody wants to speak to any of our authors this evening, Charlotte in a few minutes is just going to open it up, and but also feel free to put your questions into the Q&A. Might be easier than the chat. But you know, again, thank you so much to each of you, not only for your readings and you know, giving us an opportunity to find out more about you and about your stories, but also for the time that you spent with us preparing for this. You know, these don't just happen. You know, even with all the flubs, we still go through a little bit of a dress rehearsal, and so I really appreciate the time that you've taken out of your writing schedules and your marketing schedules to do that and show up here tonight. And I know for, you know, I've got a whole list of more books to have in my to be read files, and I'm seeing the same thing in the chat. So thank you very much, all of you, and wishing you all the success in the world with new releases and everything that's coming up. All right, and Charlotte, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You're doing a fabulous job. And
right.
there she is. I can see you now.
So we've come to the end of the formal evening. Just one thing I wanted, Karen Abrahamson has a promotion going on for the Phoebe Clay series. So Karen, can you just tell people about it? I couldn't type as fast as you can probably speak.
Yes, speak to us, Karen.
Okay, so Beneath Malabar Nets releases on November 15th. And until November 15th, that novel is available for pre-release price of $1.99. And Through Dark Water, the first book in the series, is available for 99 cents. Both are available through my website or at your favorite ebook e-tailer.
Fabulous.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
and if any of our other authors this evening want to just let us know about promotions, just put it in the chat and we'll make sure that you get to cover that as well. Charlotte, I'm going to be quiet and let you do your thing.
Okay. Just before I stop the recording and open it up for a free-for-all, I wanted to thank Karen Dodd and Deborah Henry, who is our membership vice president, for all of the heavy lifting that they did to pull this showcase together. It's you know, it was a work of love, but still it takes a lot of energy and effort, and it's wonderful for our chapter that we have people who are so willing to step up and volunteer to run events like this. So Karen, Deborah, I know you're in there lurking, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's I'm going to stop the recording, then I'll open it up for further discussion.